Day. How are you?
Tracy. Hi, I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I'm trying to think I've got news to share. I went to a comedy singles. That was fun.
Oh, okay. That sounds different. Tell us
It
about
is different. It's like stand-up comedy with two comedians, a guy and a girl, and the whole thing is about dating, and everybody in the room is single, supposedly. There was a couple in there, actually. And it was essentially comedy mixed with games, and it was a little bit like Blind Date. Remember that show?
with Cilla Black.
Cilla Black. So you had contestants and you had a person looking for a date, and the person was either blindfolded. No, they were always blindfolded. But either they would pick based on the answers, you'd ask, how would you describe yourself if you were a food or something?
Okay, one of those
Equally.
One of those corny lines.
Yeah, corny questions, corny, comebacks. Like there was this, I won't even tell you because a lot of it was very crude and foul, if you like.
Oh.
So crude is not my kind of humor. Innuendo, I think, is funny.
Yes.
But that's just my personal humor. Innuendo, that to me is funny. Crudeness is just not funny to me. So it's a bit of both. But I had a good time because I just found it a really fun experience.
Yeah, it sounds like it, especially if you described it as a bit of like Cilla Black's Blind Date. I have to ask, did they have a Graham with that quick reminder?
Oh, the comedians kind of just set up bits of quick reminders. That's quite funny. And you had to fill in these cards where you wrote down your best or worst date, best or worst child lines, so that they would read them out like between games. And then you had the option to steal contestants. So when I say steal contestants, steal the place of a contestant. So if you like the guy or the girl, you wanted to be a contestant, you could go and pull one off the stage if you have one of these cards under your seat.
Right. So swap places with one of the contestants. I see. And so did you partake in this?
I volunteered. That's like, why not? Why not? But I got booted off the stage by somebody that wanted the seat.
Oh no. But the question is, were there any guys there that you felt like you wanted to date?
So there wasn't, unfortunately. No.
Oh.
No, not really.
Oh, okay. That's a little bit of down.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit young as well. I mean, there were probably people maybe old. Yeah, there was guys in the right age range, but not many.
Do you think that the format of this dating style is probably more suitable not suitable, but probably more attractive to a younger demographic?
No, because I was there on my own. There was a few girls on their own. And guys, I met a guy, the first person I met, there was a guy who was there on his own. So a lot of people went on their own, and there was a lady that was in her 50s. For her, she felt it more, that it was quite young. But I feel it could work for any demographic. I think, the answers would be different, but I think it would work for any demographic where you just have to have the people interested in going.
Yeah.
You've got all your people that divorced and separated. There's a big group of people there.
Yeah, I think it's a great style or a format of a way to approach dating to really target like-minded individuals. So for me, what this sounds like is that if an individual has a sense of humor as high on their high on their list in terms of attractiveness, then it seems obvious that a comedy style dating event would be a forum where you could there's more chance of meeting another person who's obviously valuing comedy and a sense of humor in a partner.
Perhaps. I also think there was a bit of away from motivation for some of the people there. So, what you're talking about is towards motivation, towards that type of setup, like the comedy side. But for some people, it was, I'm sick of online dating and there's nothing else to do. So I'm going to go to this. So I think it just depends. It might be a bit of both. I think not necessarily everybody there was a massive comedy buff. I just feel like it was a different experience, another way to meet people. And I think it's a really good idea because it is an experience. And they also gave you like cards, and you write your name and number on. And if you saw anyone you like, you could just hand them the card, with at least the confidence that everybody's there to potentially meet someone and they're single. And I'm like, that's such a good idea. Maybe I should just carry these cards around the street.
It would be so much easier, wouldn't it? Where, well, you say that, but let's rewind back about 20 years ago, before iPhones, before mobile phones. I know I'm showing my age here, but I'm owning that. I remember a time when if you liked someone, you would write your number down on a piece of paper and simply hand it to them. And that's basic. And then you'd have to, if somebody gave you their number, you'd be revising it in your head and then waiting by the phone at home, religiously sitting there waiting for the phone to ring. But that's how it used to be about 20 years ago, so I wish that would come back round again,
Well, I guess it could. I mean, nothing to stop you doing it. And I mean, if you're doing it with people who are a close age to you, then it's not going to be it'll only be a surprise in the sense that nobody does that anymore. But it's not like a surprise that they don't know that's a thing that people used to do.
Yeah.
So,
it's the same in the workplace. I remember a time when you'd have business cards and you'd go to a meeting or you'd meet somebody in the street in a coffee and then realize that you were very in the same industry and you basically hand them your business card. And that's also been lost. So
well, it's still going, trust me. I've been going to these networking groups and I keep getting handed business cards. I tend to not do that anymore because you can have like a QR code and
that's it.
Yeah, you can do all that kind of thing. But older schools still do the whole business card thing, for sure. But yeah, it's quite.
And I suppose it's better for the planet.
Yeah, as well, the paper and for sure.
Yeah.
So that was my thing last week. What about you? What have you been up to?
Well, I have to say,
besides reading a million books.
Yeah, besides reading a million books, I have to say, the comedy format, dating format, never have I ever done that. So, and the reason why I say that format is because I've just binge watched Never Have I Ever series 4. And I have to say, I'm proudly saying it because I absolutely loved this one. I absolutely loved series 4. Hands down, it was the wittiest and the funniest of all the series. And I love the fact that, and I'm not going to do any spoiler alerts, but I love the fact that in the last episode, virtually all of it was all played out by an actress who wore a sari throughout the whole episode. And I absolutely loved that.
Oh, okay. Well, I started watching it last night. I've been waiting for it to come out because I love that show as well. And I nearly got I nearly got pulled in. I did watch one more than I needed to really to get, decent sleep there. So I nearly did. I probably watched some more tonight, or maybe not because I'm going out, but I'll be watching it. I bet you any money I finished it by the end of the weekend.
I probably will. I have to say, the reason why I loved it was because there were moments where there was lots of LOL moments for me in series 4, but the way it was written and it was the humor of it. It was great. And there's some teary moments too.
Well, the actors are really good, aren't they?
They are, yeah. And I think it transports you back. For me, it transported me back to a 16, 17-year-old version of myself where it actually is put together all of what you were thinking and what you were feeling into this series. And it's very nostalgic too.
Yeah, it does really. Yeah, I can totally see situations that played out for me in high school or other friends even in high school, and the insecurities and the misunderstandings.
That's right. And I think the reason why it really resonates is because the series, the main character is an Indian character, and growing up, I never had, I used to watch Beverly Hills 90210, you watch Grange Hill, there weren't any Indian characters in those, and there weren't any main characters. And so I think this is why I'm resonating with it all too.
Yeah, I know. I think there was, I'm going to say this, I don't like to say it, but in Grange Hill, I think there was a token Indian and a token Black person.
I think during that time, it was 1980s, wasn't it? Yeah, let's get a token Black person, token Indian person. It's like what Rennie, our podcast guest last week, was saying.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. The agency description of who they represent, they have one Black person because
and I think that's the reason why I really enjoyed Never Have I Ever was because and again, no spoiler alerts, but the very last episode, it wasn't until I was getting to the end of it when I realized, hold on, this main character, she's been wearing a sari this whole episode, the whole final episode, she's been wearing a sari. And that just brought such a smile to my face. I felt it was such a warming thing to see. I applaud the producers and the writers for doing that.
Oh, there you go. All right, we've got a lot to cover today. So, we share stories on this podcast about celebrating achievements, especially of those of underrepresented and minority groups, showing representation in places where is not the norm, and talking about policy and news and behavior that's supporting or against diversity or even discriminatory. And I was really saddened to hear the news lately about what's happening in Florida and the bills being passed in Florida. And even recently, I mean, by the time this podcast episode goes out, it'll be maybe even a month since this has happened. But, the governor in Florida is signing bills banning children from undergoing transgender medical treatments, but not just children. It affects adults as well, or young adults. Going to drag shows and restricting pronoun use in classrooms. So it's putting out a lot of legislation that's regulating basically the LGBTQ community or LGBT community. And he might be declaring his candidacy for the presidency as well. And I'm just like, what is going on? And they're also banning books in Florida. Banning books that are LGBT, but not on that premise, because I don't think they could get away with that. But they're kind of inciting that it's sexually explicit or, I don't know, violence or whatever. They're kind of using those kind of rationales to ban certain books. And apparently, and this is not in this article, but I heard somebody was telling me that, because of how they've got away with doing that, it's meant that they've had to ban things like that. This is out of school libraries as well. They've had to ban things like the Bible because it also meets the criteria that they've set to justify banning these books, which I found quite amusing because it's very hypocritical. So, I mean, their justification is that they're protecting children's innocence. And they're saying that if they allow children into adult life performances such as drag shows, so that they're stripping businesses of their licenses. So, yeah, there's just a lot going on in Florida.
I'm really surprised about the book side of things, about we're banning religious texts like the Bible, and probably obviously including religious texts, and also books around LGBTQI content, because it's deemed to be what they call damaging. Is that what the
and I mean, this is what this governor is called Mr. has waded into America's culture wars, signing bills banning teaching on gender identity in public schools, restricting abortion access, protecting gun rights, and railing against woke indoctrination.
Right. Okay. It's interesting because, I mean, this isn't going to go away. And, we are who we are. And a lot of people turn to books, for example, and also find support in their religious communities, around a lot of issues. And, preventing books and especially on religious texts and also on LGBTQI content, that's not going to resolve a situation. That's not going to stop a situation from occurring.
No, and I mean, this whole banning the medical treatments, the Medical Association endorses a number of, they're the experts, they're endorsing treatments, even saying that it's appropriate, even saying it's life-saving for some people, especially those diagnosed with gender dysphoria, which is, the belief or feeling that you're not the gender you of birth. And I just think it's just causing more harm than good. It's just really scary to hear that, that this person's in power and they're doing this. So
it is scary to hear. I suppose it's a reflection on how much support that this perspective has.
That as well. Yeah, of course.
And it's exposing that, So
Yeah.
it's scary. I can understand what you're saying, Tracy. It's surprising and also scary to see how it's gaining momentum.
We'll see, because he's supposed to be essentially running in 2024. But I don't know if he can, if Trump's running again. It's scary.
Yeah,
and
we get to see if he's able to run again.
Well, yeah, if he's not, well, this guy definitely will be. I just think, the world's going backwards.
It's down to the American public to vote. It really is down to the American public to vote.
Yeah, it is, I guess. And I just think it's more than that. It's down to the American public to really inform yourself on these issues and the impact it has on communities.
But if they're not given access to the literature, which allows them to inform themselves,
exactly
what kind of outcome can be expected.
Exactly. I mean, and it's always interesting to me, the people that so passionately want to ban these things or censor these things are people that don't have, or that don't necessarily have to live with that problem, or anybody close to them doesn't necessarily have to live with that backlash or that prejudice or that lack of support. I know it's not always the case, but it is often the case. Basically, it doesn't affect them. Why they're so against it doesn't actually affect them. And you might say, well, it affects other people and they care about other people, but it's against the people that they're claiming to try and protect. And that's the difference. It's going against their wishes and their needs. And anyway.
That's a good point you make. Very good point you make, Tracy. Yeah.
So what do you have for us?
So an article that came up is from The Guardian. And I think The Guardian wrote an article about how retailers, and this is in England, have been trying to put in methods to stop shoplifting. And in their race section of The Guardian, The Guardian now published an article which is from a reader who's basically said that it's her skin color that makes her a target in shops. So I'm just going to read the actual headline is, "My skin color makes me a target in shops." The article says, "I understand the challenges that retail stores face, and I don't dispute the need for vigilance. Still, my experience as a minority ethnic customer have highlighted a problem that isn't getting enough attention. In many shops, from convenience stores and supermarkets to clothing retailers, I've noticed that I get followed by staff members most of the time. Initially, I dismissed these occurrences as coincidences. Over time, however, the frequency, patterns, and consistency of these instances left little room for doubt. I am being racially profiled. This phenomenon is largely unrecognizable to my white friends and family, which only intensifies the sting of its implications. Their difficulty comprehending my experience points to a pervasive, tacit bias, frequently unnoticed by those it doesn't directly affect. This is an experiential manifestation of what has been colloquially termed shopping while Black. Although I am brown-skinned, the discrimination is rooted in the same racial bias. That stores need to tackle shoplifting is clear, but it seems their efforts often lead to racial profiling, which is incredibly disheartening. I've tried discussing this with customer service teams for some well-known supermarket and clothing chains, but nothing has changed. Thankfully, I'm doing well for myself and would never consider stealing." So, yeah, this is an interesting article. So it actually goes on to say, "This is a plea to retail establishments to acknowledge their systemic racial bias in their security measures, if present, and work towards eradicating it. Striking a balance between protecting profits and respecting the dignity of all customers, irrespective of their racial or ethnic backgrounds, is paramount. The cost of overlooking this balance is unacceptably high, as evidenced by my experience."
Yeah, and it happens a lot. I mean, have I personally experienced it? I'll honestly say I have no recollection. I can't say I've noticed that personally. However, I do know it happens. I have family members that describe it. I have a friend here lives in Melbourne, or a friend of a friend really, who's described it to me. She's from the UK, where going into the shop, and it's that, you could say, oh, it's in their head, because nobody's saying anything to them, but they're looking at them, and their eyes are following them around the shop, and the energy is not a positive one. Do you know what I mean? You can sense energy.
Yeah.
You can totally sense energy. People go, walk in a room and you could cut the tension with a knife. You can feel energy.
That's energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's saying you can cut the atmosphere with a knife. That's energy.
That's energy, exactly. So you can feel the energy when somebody's looking at you in an untrusting way, and now I'm making things up, like you're a criminal, like you're a bad person, like they should be afraid of you, or something like that. So that's a really terrible thing. And you go, well, how is it a problem? Well, not only is it a problem for the person that it's happening to, because it makes their experience uncomfortable, it makes them maybe not want to buy things, it's dehumanizing, it's disempowering, but also it's a problem because when it becomes so pervasive, what we see is people getting killed by police. People getting stopped unnecessarily by law enforcement in different countries under suspicions and actually losing their lives. And then in this country, it tends to be a problem that we have with Indigenous population here. You see higher incarceration rates as well. So that's why it's a huge, huge problem. And it just becomes so pervasive in the societies, and people don't even realize it. But there's plenty of research. It's a thing now. There's plenty of research.
I mean, how would you be able to, research into this? I mean, I know, we're talking about experiences. And I know that, thinking about it, I can't think of a time when I've experienced this type of racial profiling. However, I don't know whether or not it's hidden by something else. So, for example, I've been in situations more than one time where when I've been a customer, I've walked into a retail establishment, I've picked up an item and I've asked about the product color, and the answer is about the price. And so I've stepped away thinking, I didn't ask about how much it was. I asked whether or not it was available in a different color. And I've just walked away thinking, not in terms of if it's racial profiling or whether or not that same question would be asked if I wasn't brown skinned. I've walked away just thinking, it's more of can you afford this particular product? But, whether or not that retailer would ask the same question, would respond to somebody else who was Caucasian, for example, would that happen? I don't know. It'd be an interesting experiment to see
I think
whether or not, if they could put a hidden camera and compare the response of someone who's Caucasian versus someone who's brown skinned to see what kind of response that they'd get. That would be interesting.
That's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if it's been done. And I mean, so looking at some of the statistics that are, evidence-based and out there. For example, you compare apples with apples. So it's something like speeding. Apparently there was a review of data, and I guess it was a bit of an experiment around, unfair policing, the disproportionate amount of stops of people racially motivated, for example. So, white people speeding or an ethnic person speeding demonstrated that for speeding black drivers were 4.8 times more likely to be stopped than a speeding white driver. So you can't say that's not racially profiling.
Yeah. And it's interesting also about the article is saying about that retailers need to be made aware of this, and it'd be great if they put things into action. So, I know it's been a long time since I worked in retail, but I know that there are training sessions that happen in retail environments. It would be really great. It'd be really interesting to see this being introduced now.
Yeah, it's like, what are you actually looking for? If you just, say shoplifting is a problem in your store, I think the problem is, even like now, potentially in the terrible problem we're having financially across the world, people are struggling, cost of living, people may be in positions where they feel that's their only option, and it might actually be their only option still. And it's not just going to be Black people. It's pretty much affecting so many people. So I guess it's like, if you're going to be training, and if you really have a problem with shoplifting, then you need to put things in place that are not targeting minorities. You're right.
Yeah, but it was also just having the conversation, opening up the conversation. I know it can be I can imagine it would probably be slightly uncomfortable about talking about race when it comes to security measures and shoplifting. But if the conversation is opened up and if it's held in a certain way, then I think just by putting it out there and opening up a conversation, putting awareness on it.
I think it needs like a very specialized training, for sure. I mean, there's that comedian Mo Gilligan, has a joke about it. Have you seen that joke?
I've seen Mo Gilligan's shows. I'm trying to think. I think he used to
it's spraying. Is it Joe Malone or something?
Yeah, he used to work in Joe Malone in Westfield.
And he's like, the brother comes in and stealing it.
Yeah.
So there's a joke, and it's funny.
I mean, he's sending it up. Mo Milligan is sending this particular topic up. He's taking this topic about how people of color are being associated with shoplifting, and he just turned a joke around as in like, hey, come on, let's not feed into this. So yeah, he's obviously tackled this subject, and obviously put his own comedy spin on it, as he always does. And it was very funny. Yeah, but it's exactly that. Let's take that and then put that into training sessions, open up a conversation, make it normalize the fact that this is happening.
It happens, and this is but I think they need to be told what it looks like. For example, to me, I would say your experience there is racially profiling. You asking if they have this in other colours and them telling you how much it cost. Really? I'd probably think that. It depends, I wasn't there. So it's more than just what the words they use, it's how they say it. It's the energy as well.
But at the same time, I think also, like I'm just, when I was saying it out loud, it reminded me of the Pretty Woman, the film Pretty Woman. And, they basically, and in Pretty Woman, she's a Caucasian female. And so, and this happens to her.
Yeah, that's another prejudice. She didn't look the part, did she? So the prejudice has been around as, age old, but it's always different groups of people. And the problem is, it's for a long time in just high street, just in grocery shopping. These are not like prestigious shops. You're being experienced prejudice on a regular occasion. It's not great. I mean, even Oprah got refused service.
That's right.
In
Hermes.
One of the
Hermes, she wasn't able to buy her handbag from Hermes.
Yeah, so they wouldn't serve her. And I can't think of any other reason than the fact that she was Black.
Yeah.
So, and like, she's one of the wealthiest women in the world.
Yeah.
I can only think the shop person had no idea who she was.
But I think that's exactly what happened. They didn't, but regardless, whether or not she was Oprah or whether or not she was Oprah, let the woman buy the handbag.
Yeah.
Let the woman have the handbag.
Exactly. It's just
there's obviously that bias, as in like, okay, well, she may not be able to afford it. And it goes back to that Pretty Woman scenario about it's what you look like and if we're going to be able to sell it to you. So,
well, I don't know if it could be you don't, but it's also that we don't want you representing our brand.
Yeah,
it could be that side of it. I don't really know which one. Could be both. I don't know.
Yeah.
So who knows? But yeah, racial profiling is the thing. And actually, when we also had on, just touch on this, we had my mentor on here, Andrew Law, and he talked about, he's Asian, Malaysian background. And he talked about what it was like when he first moved here. And he actually got placed in a university in like a rural town, rural Australia. So my preconceptions about rural Australia is they're less exposed to difference. And so their perspectives are a lot narrower. Let's just put it that way. And he described experiences where potentially he was being racially profiled, but he described how he handled that. And I just thought it took such grace, the way he handled it. And he described a scenario where he'd go into a shop and getting looked at, and he'd be following him, and he would go straight up to the person and go, "Hi, how are you? I really like your shop or whatever you're selling," and start a conversation. And then it would become a conversation asking, "Oh, what are you doing, or where are you from?" And he'd start to, and he saw that approach completely diffuse the situation and became a positive thing. And then the next time he walked in that shop, he was greeted warmly. So that I thought was a fantastic approach. Not necessarily would work every time, but I guess what people see if they are racially profiling you, is there's fear there. And, the simplest way I can describe what he did is he diffused the fear with love. That's the simplest way I can describe how his approach works. So it's not judging the person, it's not blaming, it's not getting angry. It's just going in and starting a conversation. "Hey, how are you? Blah, blah." And actually, if somebody was following me around the shop, I would start talking to them for now. But "Hey, do we know each other? Follow me around the shop." You before?
Do I know you from somewhere? Yeah. That's right. Oh, yes, that's right. You were in the previous shop that I was in. That's right.
Do you like me? You do, don't you?
I've always wanted a stalker.
Yeah. Anyway, we've got to move on to the next story, because I just thought this was so cool. We kind of talked about this before. So this story is from the news source, Positive News. And I discovered this news source when I was first started this podcast, because I wanted to find positive news, because a lot of news is not positive. And so this is quite great, but sad at the same time. So in Positive News, and the headline is, "The taboo around medicine's most ignored organ is finally being broken." So what do you think the world's most ignored organ is? Well, I know you know the answer, but if you didn't know the answer, what would you think? Would you think of?
Oh gosh, I'd be thinking of something. Yeah, I don't know whether or not it would be first thing to come to mind, but maybe I would.
It wouldn't be the first thing that comes to mind, because I hadn't even considered it as an organ, firstly. So for me, it wouldn't have been the first thing. So for centuries, the clitoris has been ignored by medicine, shrouded in shame and secrecy, until recently, most up-to-date information on how many nerve endings it contains came from a 1976 study of cows.
Oh, I love this. Cows. We're talking about the C word here, aren't we?
Now, thanks to the work of a few committed doctors and activists, it's finally being brought out of the shadows. And this writer shares how in their early 30s, that was when they learned the difference between a vulva and a vagina. Do you know the difference between a vulva and a vagina?
Hold on, I'm just trying to figure out. Hold on. So this experiment was done on cows.
Oh, we're going back to that, yeah. Not now. It's come from that research, but that back then it was in the 70s.
Right.
Okay. But now my question is, do you know the difference between a vulva and a vagina?
The vulva is it's a part of the vagina.
Right. Okay. So this person saying in their 30s, that's when they learned that. They learned about the actual anatomy of the clitoris. And they've given birth 3 times. And she did biology. And so she's interested in health and medicine. And yet when she took a proper look, she was surprised. And then 2022 study, so this is just last year, gynecologist at the University of Manchester, yay Manchester, because I went to uni there, less than 10% of women could accurately label female genitalia. That's a bit scary, isn't it?
Yeah. I actually, because it reminds me of like when you mentioned about this she was studying biology, this woman. So I remember in my biology lessons, I don't remember being given a diagram and being able to label parts of the female anatomy or even a male anatomy. I can't remember it, but I remember there was an episode on sex education Netflix series where that was the assignment.
Yeah, it's funny. And I do remember that was high school. I went to a Catholic school, but it was part of the sex ed, part of science, and it wasn't a detailed, it was the vagina and uterus kind of thing more than the rest of it.
Yeah.
And and the penis.
So it sounds more like it was for reproductive.
It was more a reproductive kind of description, and so left a lot out. Let's just put it like that. Left a lot out. I don't even think the clitoris was in there. I don't even think I knew what that was.
And it's interesting because, you know, you mentioned about biology and sex education classes. And so ideally in a biology class, it would be focusing on reproduction organs.
No, I think the anatomy of the whole thing.
Yeah, but however, in a sex education class, that's where the emphasis would be on the actual sexual organs, like clitoris, for example. Whereas in a biology class, the emphasis ideally would be on reproductive organs. I
don't think so.
Traditionally.
I just think biology should be focused on biology.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. But I'm saying that.
Yeah.
In traditional style, like I remember when I was at school, there were sex education classes and there were biology classes. And I don't remember having diagrams with male and female genitalia and being able to label it at all. Maybe it's my memory that's not serving me. Maybe I skipped the class. I doubt it. But yeah, I can't remember that. And so I'm just thinking, if I was recalling back my education days, you know, it'd be great to say I learned about sexual organs in my sex education class, and the biology class was focused more so on the reproductive organs.
Possibly. And so like 10% of women, so this is a 2022 study, 2022.
Okay, let's see the stats.
Well, it just says less than 10% of women could accurately label female genitalia. And the clitoris is even more taboo than the vagina, and arguably the most neglected human organ by medicine. It is still inadequately depicted in most medical textbooks and barely touched upon in medical training. And this is the problem. Women have been injured by this lack of knowledge. And it's true, because if you think about childbirth, a lot of stuff can happen down there and a lot of damage can be caused. And are they going to know how to fix that if they don't know about the full biology of it? That's just one reason, one medical reason. This is a serious problem. Women have been injured by this lack of knowledge through botched reconstruction surgeries, anti-incontinence procedures. So these are examples. Obstetric tears and repairs, so this again, childbirth, and vulvectomy, and that's hopefully going to start to change. Now, this is so sad. This is what's sad. Only in 2022 they got the most up-to-date research, but bothered to find it. First things first, let's define our terms. Clitoris is from the Greek Clitoris, which means little hill, though it's more like a mountain range than a hill, and way more extensive than most people realize. 90% of the organ is internal. It looks a little like a wishbone with two bulbs attached. The external tip is the glans. This is what most people think of as the clitoris. The main nerve in the clitoris, like in the penis, is the dorsal nerve, which runs through the clitoral body and makes the organ particularly sensitive. There is also the clitoral hood, the clitoral bulbs, and the crura, the longest leg part that can extend when erect up to 9 centimeters into the pelvis. I just feel like this is your internal penis.
Yes, exactly. That's right. This is the holy grail.
Yeah, the holy grail. I think it's your internal penis. So it's much bigger and more complex than most people realize, which has implications not just in the bedroom and the classroom, but on the operating table. Now, a number of people from across different fields, expertise are leading the way and giving clitoris the attention it deserves through fighting misinformation, conducting cutting-edge scientific research, and shifting cultural norms around sexual health. So it means surgeons can spare crucial nerves during gender reassignments or clitoral reconstruction for women who have undergone FGM. Do you know what FGM is? Yeah. Enables female genital mutilation. Yeah. Enables us to improve anatomy textbooks and better understand the mechanisms behind female orgasm, and gives medicine a chance to finally give adequate care to half the world's population.
FGM has impacted or affects a lot of the African population. Well, not a lot, but there's a considerable amount of the African population that is impacted by FGM. And I think, and I haven't read around this, but I think what I understand, it may be behind it, maybe cultural practices.
Yeah, it's a cultural practice.
And so, yeah, that's what I know about FGM is there are cultural practices or traditions which are still being practiced in Africa, include FGM.
Yes, a very
and
disturbing and traumatic cultural practice. And this is why when people justify behaviors or beliefs by saying it's part of our culture, I don't take that at face value. I was like, well, I don't care, it's part of your culture. How's it impacting people's lives?
And that's what's coming to the surface. That's what's been coming to the surface in the last years.
So it goes on to talk about the history of the organ in terms of what it's been called, how it's been named, and then, but mostly taboo, let's be honest, because I never really knew what the word clitoris until I was a lot older. In 1947, the clitoris was removed from the 25th edition of Gray's Anatomy, the doctor's Bible, right? By the editor. And then Sigmund Freud relegated the clitoris to the lunatic asylum of sexuality. And clitoral orgasms were infantile and evidence of mental illness. This is what Sigmund Freud wrote. That's
hilarious. Good old Freud.
Yeah. Whilst vaginal ones were mature and healthy. And I remember and this is like in the 20s of the 21st century, a guy saying something about, I can't remember, like they could only orgasm through penetration. There was something about it, his perception of that. Or that was, I can't remember. It was so stupid. It was kind of this.
It's an interesting one because, you mentioned about that 10%, only 10% of women would be able to identify where their clitoris is.
Well, not where the clitoris is, just correctly.
The anatomy. And, there's a lot of, I know, out there's when it comes to, women talking about their sexual experiences, there's this common thing about, he doesn't even know where it is, where they're obviously referring to the clitoris. And so, but at the same time, there's, if women don't know where their clitoris is, how can you expect your man to know where the clitoris is?
Well, this is the thing. Who teaches the men? But to be fair, who teaches the men and who teaches women should be school. It shouldn't.
It goes back to the sex education classes.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, and in medical terms, it's not even in a medical textbook at one point.
Yeah, but we say that we are, Tracy, we're saying, it'd be great if sex education classes could take this on. But just imagine if they did, what kind of backlash would that have with parents?
Well, the ultimate conservative,
Yeah, so we've also been talking about, how there's backlash around from parents around what their kids are read and who it's read by. But can you imagine if this was being taught in sex education classes, what kind of backlash parents would have?
Well, I think, to be honest, it might actually be taught, and I reckon some parents would have problems with it and may have the option to have their child opt out. I think that's probably an option. I don't know exactly. I'd have to ask some teachers that I know. And it goes on to talk about how things changed in the 20th century. Australian urologist Helen O'Connell. So big up to Australian neurologist.
And I was Helen. Just say, well, neurologist, that's you're talking my language.
No, urologist.
Neurologist, right.
No, you.
Oh, urologist.
Yeah, urologist.
I see.
So big up for Helen O'Connell, urologist, not neurologist. Outraged by the absence of the clitoris in textbooks, she decided to tackle the problem. In 2005, and it just scares me how recent this is, she used MRI to create accurate images of the organ and confirm the illustrations that Cobalt made. She was surprised by how large the nerves were, more than 2 millimeters in width, not a thread, more like the wire in a coat hanger. She also published a paper which found that, contrary to popular belief, the G-spot did not exist as a discrete anatomical construct, and made it clear that the clitoris was the focus of orgasm for most women, and people should know where to find it. And the fact that your clitoris is so deep inside, that's probably what people think is a G-spot.
Yeah, I think a G-spot is probably, I don't know how that was constructed, but obviously it took off with lots of rap stars.
Yeah, and the fact is it's probably the internal part of your clitoris. But anyway, we're educating people, we're educating ourselves here, because I wouldn't know any of this. And it wasn't until 2022, however, that the nerves in the clitoris were quantified. Previously, the off-cited claim that it has 8,000 nerve endings came from a 1976 study of cows. Blair Peters, self-styled as the queer surgeon with he, they pronouns, is a gender-reforming surgeon with extensive training in nerve surgery. He performs phalloplasty, which is the creation of the penis for mostly transmasculine individuals, but also for cisgender people with trauma or conditions such as cancer. His passion is genital sensation and elevating the importance of sexual health. When he first began working in the field of major genital reconstruction, he was surprised doctors weren't talking to people about sexual function. So that motivated him to delve deeper into what they can do. So surprise, the 8,000 nerves figure was inaccurate in a study published last October 2022 that created headlines around the world. Peters revealed that the number of nerves was in fact more than 10,000. And the implications were huge. And it's really important in eliminating misinformation around this area. But there was another bit I wanted to read. Why it's so neglected. That was what I wanted to read. Why does he think the clitoris has been so neglected until now? And he says a lot of it comes down to suppression of sexuality for anyone who isn't a straight man, he says. The way we view sex as being penile penetration only, and that doesn't capture the sexual experience for so many of us. For people with problems other than medical procedures, Peter says, there is really not many options out there, nor is there very much literature. Jessica Pinn, a self-styled as MedClit, is a clitoral activist with a huge online following. So I'm going to follow her. Her advocacy work as a result of her own experience of the devastating effects of medical neglect. She was harmed during surgery. Her clitoral hood was cut and sensation lost during a labiaplasty, and she decided to campaign for better medical education in vulvar anatomy. So that's really wonderful. And she's been advocating for the clitoris to be returned to textbooks. And she's got 9 major medical textbooks changed. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And says her mission's not nearly finished. She's working to get anatomy of the clitoris covered in the same depth as other organs. She found that there were 57 times as many words about the penis compared with the clitoris in medical textbooks. And she wanted to establish anatomical basis for female sexual medicine and ensure all doctors considered qualified to operate on vulvas are taught clitoral anatomy.
Yeah, I think what this is saying is that it's really highlighting that. Again, it's bringing out this topic into a wider forum and bringing it out of the shadows, so that if there are any individuals who are going, or if any individual finds himself going through the likelihood that there may be some surgery which includes or in and around the female genitalia, start having conversations with the doctor, have that conversation with the doctor, with the surgeon about, about this, about how it's going to impact the clitoris. Because I've never heard of this, the clitoris being a consideration when it comes to childbirth surgeries.
No,
it's an interesting topic, and it should be brought out of the shadows.
It absolutely should. But, you might have a surgeon that is not educated, isn't trained. And she says she came across ideological brick walls in her work. Medical professionals who say it's not important, for example. It's a really big problem that people say the clitoris is just for pleasure, because what happens is that doctors say we're not focused on pleasure, we're focused on reproduction. And there was in 2019, the British scientist Roy Levin published a review study which argued that the clitoris has a key function in reproduction as well as pleasure. He analysed 15 studies published in 1966, 2017, which showed that clitoral stimulation enhances blood flow, increases lubrication and tenting, all of which has a positive effect on the activation of sperm. So there is a potential reproductive cost as well. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say, because this whole argument that, that's the reason why it's been neglected, because they're arguing that it was pleasure, not reproduction, and it wasn't clinically important to have to think about it because sexual function wasn't a priority. However, for men, there seems to be a lot more study of that organ.
Absolutely, there's complete double standards there.
Yeah. So So you'll see more activists readdressing the wrongs and misinformation around this neglected organ, championed by a very few passionate individuals, artists as well, leading the way, celebrating the clitoris through street art and sculptures such as the Clitoris, an enormous golden sequin model designed by Sydney-based artist Ali Sebastian Wolf. And designers are celebrating the accurate anatomy through necklaces, lights, dresses, t-shirts, mugs, postcards, and the Vagina Museum's sell out, clitorally adorable earrings.
Well, that's interesting. I know that there's a lingerie shop in a boutique in London or in England, should I say, because they have stores all over England, I'm sure, called Coco de Mer. And Coco de Mer, one of the reasons why they selected that name as their shop was because Coco de Mer is a plant, and its seed, when you look at a picture, looks very similar to a vagina.
Oh, interesting.
So, and that's why it's called Coco de Mer shop. And so it sells very provocative lingerie. And I thought that was we've obviously selected that word really well. Coco.
I'm going to end on this 5 things you didn't know about the clitoris.
Hit us with it.
Okay. So the clitoris has more than double the number of nerves in the penis. All female mammals have clitorises. The largest belongs to the blue whale and can be up to 3 feet long. Clitorises get erections. They are comprised of erectile tissue and become bigger, harder, and engorged when aroused, just like the penis. The clitoris continues growing through life. Oh, it continues to grow. It could be 2.5 times bigger in your 90s than it was in your teens.
There you go. That's an ad for old age, if ever I heard it. They should put that on the cover of a card. Yeah, definitely.
The name for the flower Asian pigeon wings is Clitoria ternatia, and it looks like a clitoris. That was it. I thought it was so interesting and great.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if we can uncover if there are more stories that come out about this, the big C, in our podcast. So over the coming months, let's see if there are any stories that come out around this.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I think we've just got time
very quickly.
What would you do?
Right, so we have to make this really quick, but I had a what would you do moment the other day. So we've got a long weekend coming up here in Australia, and I was on a walk with with a work colleague. I was out with a work colleague. I don't really know her that well, and she asked me what I was doing for a long weekend, and I let her know that I didn't have anything planned, but there is an exhibition that is happening on the weekend, which one of our other work colleagues has been putting together, and it's based around racism in Australia. And so I said I'd probably go to that to support, and also because I'm interested in that topic. And her response to me was, racism is everywhere. I'm not sure what an exhibition is going to do or make any difference. I don't understand why everyone's complaining about it. It's always going to be here. So what would you do in that moment, Tracy? And what would you say if I told you that the person who made the comment was a person of color?
Well, yeah, that does put a different spin on it, different context on it, for sure. What would I do? I would just say, you could say it's defensive, I don't know. I said, if we all thought like that, Black people would still be slaves. And I said, yeah, she's right. Might always have racism. And that might be the reality, but it doesn't mean we can't do anything about it. Can't make life better. Can't make things fairer for people. Can't make, a society where we live in harmony. Doesn't mean that's impossible. I know people think that's an ideology. It might be, but unless you're subjected to that, and I'll be asking her, she experienced racism herself, and how did she handle it, and how did it make her feel?
Yeah.
And it might be that, I don't know, because that's one thing, you get curious about that person's experience. It might be that she has experienced it, but she's put it out of her mind, and it was a long time ago, and she's somehow avoided that in her life, or that or even worse, which I think is become so numb to it, and you give up. You've just and it's not a good place to be in. You've to kind of just resign, like you've given up. I'm a victim now. This is my life. So I don't know if that's how she's feeling. I'd be asking the questions about that.
And that's exactly what you said in the latter. That's exactly what I did in that scenario. I was a little bit taken aback by this work colleague's response. And what I did was, or how I responded was saying that, well, I'm going to be supporting our work colleague. She's put a lot of effort into this exhibition, and it's of a topic which is of interest to me. Because I've experienced racism, and I'm interested to see what it looks like in this country and hear other people's stories. And then I went on to ask her a little bit about what her experience was, but I actually ended up taking her for a coffee after work, because for the sole reason, for what you've just said there, Tracy, I was pretty taken aback by what she'd said, because she is a person of colour, and I wanted to know, where is this coming from? As she had experiences. And it turned out, without revealing too much, it turned out during our coffee was that she really opened up, and she let me know that she had some times of hardship, and she'd gone through some experiences where she was judged on her color, and when she tried to stick up for herself, she didn't have any support. And this had happened again and again. And she resided herself to the fact that she didn't feel like it. She'd been feeling very undervalued. And so it was that time when I found out about why she responded to me in the way she did. And it's exactly what you were saying, Tracy, is because it's come from a place where she just feels like she can do nothing about it. And she's already slipped into that, not victim mentality, but she slipped into that, well, let's just let it go now. Let's just let it be. So yeah, and I'm hoping that with the conversation with myself, I've made her start. I've kind of started to make her think about things in a different perspective.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, it's like asking the questions, because it's not a good place to feel so disempowered. I mean, that's my definition of a victim: disempowered. Like everything's out of your control, and life is happening to you and there's nothing you can do about it. And she didn't have the support, and that's really awful. But that's why it's so important to do something about it, so we can ensure that support is there and change does happen. So that's really that simple. But it's not a good place to be when you're thinking and feeling that way. Yeah.
And I think taking time out to actually find out where a person's perspective is coming from, I think that's really important. So, and it makes a difference.
It does make a difference. I mean, you've just held the space for her and allowed her to be heard. So that's a really beautiful thing you did there, Bav.
Thank you.
So well done. Yeah, it's a really beautiful thing you did there. If it was a white person,
would I still be taking her out for coffee?
It depends. It depends on their demeanor. Are they genuinely ignorant, or are they just trying to be divisive? Sometimes you get a sense of people just you're still looking for an argument and think they're going to get I don't know, they feed off it or something. So it really depends where that person's coming from. I would listen to my intuition. Is this a person that's open to discussion and, we're friendly terms and, not going to judge each other? I can easily do that. But I'm probably more likely to judge a person if I feel like it's just they want an argument. Do you know what I mean? And to be honest, I wouldn't really engage with them that much, because that would be the sense I would take away, that they're not open. We're not there for an open discussion. They just want to get a rise out of me. Yeah. So it really just depends.
You're not going to be falling for, so yeah.
Just depends on the feeling. And then it depends also, because you can behave in different ways depending on how you're feeling in the moment. If I've had enough sleep, when you don't have enough sleep, you've got less tolerance, and you're tired, you're grumpy, and blah blah blah. So it really depends on where I'm at as well, and how I respond at any time, because everything's context. But if I'm in my best form, it would be a curious conversation.
Yeah.
And, you know, and sharing of experiences and why I think it's important. But it wouldn't be like a defensive thing. It'd just be like a discussion. Anyway, that's how I would see it. So thanks, Bev, for that great example of what would you do?
Yeah, and thank you for another week of great discussion.
Yeah, thank you. And until the next one.
Until next time, see you then. Take care. Bye.
Bye.